Generates less than 5,000 megawatts for a nation of over 200 million people. That's according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Well, even so, the transmission network often cannot transport the paltry amount of energy generated due to its fragility. The distribution network is also in a poor state. In contrast, Egypt produces over 59,500 megawatts, and the level of power keeps rising. South Africa, 56,000 megawatts for almost 60 million people. Less than a third of Nigeria, has a long-proved grossly inadequate, and it has been experiencing load shedding and all of that. For Nigeria to become a middle-income economy, it has to generate and effectively transmit and distribute at least 100,000 megawatts within the foreseeable future. This will mean tremendous employment and business opportunities for millions of people. Nigeria's power sector in 2024 was marred by incessant grid collapses and infrastructure vandalism, among several lows, which showcased the age-long weakness in the sector. There were also some highs, like the signing into law of the electricity bill by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as government struggled to navigate challenges and keep the electricity sector afloat. Now, joining me live in the studio is Noelle Okwedy. She is a consultant, Nextier Power. I hope I got that right. Congratulations on your new role. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for coming into our studio. I think we should start with the present state of Nigeria's power generation and all of that. You see, this has been something that we've been talking about for some time. What do you really make of this and the continuous vandalism and all of that we've seen in recent times?
Thanks, Tolulope. So there have been improvements in the power sector, but like you said, there have also been drawbacks. So in terms of improvements, we've seen service-based tariffs come into effect where Nigerians are now getting service based on how much they pay. So that means Band A customers who get over 20 hours of electricity are paying over 200 naira per kilowatt hour, and Band B gets 18 hours and so on and so forth. So we're seeing cost-reflective tariffs coming into the sector. We've also seen an increase in generation capacity, but then we've also seen issues with transmission, with vandalism, and last year there were 12 grid collapses, which was a record even for Nigeria. And of course, these collapses are disruptive to businesses and to households in Nigeria. But overall, there have also been new introductions or new initiatives that are still taking shape, like bilateral trading schemes and also state electricity markets, which we're seeing take form, especially in states like Lagos, Enugu, and some other states across Nigeria. And we hope that the improvements will continue and the weaknesses will be fixed in 2025.
Indeed. I saw the figures from TCN yesterday, number of vandalism. What even happened in Abuja, very notable, that almost affected the whole of the space. We've also seen upgrades sometimes coming from the TCN and all of that. You know that argument that it used to be the weakest link, and many used to say, but do you think that, I think I need to just ask that question, that if that is privatized, but when you say no, but do you think maybe they could do better?
So I think privatization, like we've seen in distribution, isn't the fix. We've already seen that it's not a silver bullet. But I think in transmission, especially with the issue of vandalism, I don't think you can look at the power sector without looking at the country at large, especially issues of poverty and people not being able to afford electricity or even beyond electricity, things like food. So when you think about how the power sector is funded and how money is made with people paying their bills and then that money being used to improve on the infrastructure for transmission and distribution, you see that if people aren't able to afford their electricity bills, the sector can't improve, because it means that the sector will continue to depend on government subsidies and handouts. So we want to get to a stage where the power sector is sustainable and people are also able to afford basic things. So they don't need to vandalize equipment to sell for parts or whatever the reason that they're doing that for. And then the companies in the power sector can also improve on their infrastructure, and we can have reliable electricity and fewer grid collapses.
Indeed. You touched on the tariff thing. You know, we've had this conversation even before now, cost-reflective tariffs, where the distribution companies have been harping on that fact. But finally, we now have the Band A, Band B, I fall in the Band A category, and I know what it is. We're paying through our nose. But we have the supply. Now, many will say that, is that really the solution to that issue of tariff and all of that, let's tie that also with the issue of metering. Many still don't have meters. What is playing out?
Yes, exactly. So that's a problem. So metering and higher tariffs go hand in hand,
yes,
because you want, for discos, what they care about is revenue assurance. That's being assured that if they supply electricity to house A, they'll collect their money from house A.
True.
And the only way to do that is, one, charging the right tariff, which is what service-based tariffs are kind of doing, but also metering, because if a customer isn't metered, then you don't know how much electricity that customer has consumed.
True.
And so that becomes an issue with collecting your revenue at the end of the day. There have been new introductions in metering, like deregulation of meter prices, because before now, meter prices were determined by NERC. The electricity regulator, they would release the prices, but we're now moving towards a place where meter providers can charge based on how much the meter actually costs, so that they can make money and then supply more meters. And then we have metering initiatives like the Presidential Metering Initiative and DISREP, funded by the World Bank. So there are all these metering initiatives. So it's not like the government isn't doing anything. But again, I think it still ties back to that issue of affordability, people being able to even afford the meters at the new prices and paying for their electricity, the discos also being able to afford the meters, because at the end of the day, it's their customers.
Because for me, you say when you are paying more, you expect even the discos to also do more. Upgrades and all of that is what everyone wants. We should not be having cables burning up and all of that on our streets and all of that. Now, looking at government initiative, before now we had the Siemens deal. We've had series of deals in our power sector, you know, generally around Nigeria's power sector. But notably, the figures that we see as of today, I saw the Ministry of Power talking about 5,300 and something, I think adding Zungeru and all of that being on board. But what more do you think can be done to, you know, improve? And we've not talked about renewables in recent times.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot that can be done.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, I think I said this earlier as well, all these initiatives we won't feel their impact if people can't afford to pay for electricity, because that's how the discos make money. And it's not cheap. And as we know, there are lots of issues in the Nigerian economy. Inflation is high, has been high for a while now, and a lot of people are struggling. So even though Band A tariffs, and there's also the fact that even though Band A tariffs are cost reflective, the other bands are still paying subsidized tariffs. So tariffs are ranging between 60 naira and 30 to 40 naira, which is not cost reflective at all. So there needs to be a push to make all the tariffs cost reflective. Sorry to the Nigerian public, but it's very important.
Because comparing it to other countries,
exactly,
we know.
Tariffs are really cheap, or not even that they are cheap, they are not cost reflective. That's the issue. So we need to get to a place where tariffs are cost reflective. Discos can recover their money to invest in infrastructure. TCN can also invest in infrastructure. And also with the government doing its bits to improve the disposable income of Nigerians, people can actually afford these bills, and we can start seeing developments across the country, not just in the power sector, but across the economy.
No, because we've left, research shows that we've left that sector for a long while, no much of investments in the sector. That is why all of this is happening. So clearly something needs to be done to make us move from where we are. Let's talk about state electricity market now. There's been a lot of, we just get to the news every day and you hear NERC is handing over to this state, NERC is handing over to this state, and all of that. How is this going to help us improve what we have?
So the point of state electricity markets is to decentralize from the regional market. So the idea is that Lagos State has its own electricity market, which it's regulating with its own discos, that is giving licenses to its own transmission company, its own generation companies, and so on and so forth. And that way there's not so much pressure at the top from the regional market, but then in each state there's enough infrastructure. States are also attracting investments, and even for people that don't have access to electricity, because in rural areas, that's where we see the highest amount of people without electricity. So with states focusing on their smaller geographical locations or franchise areas, then we can see more electrification in rural areas, but also improve service in urban areas. That's the ideal. But obviously there's the issue of attracting investments, which some states like Lagos might have an easier time doing, but then other states, especially in northern Nigeria, might not have such an easy time. So we're still in the transitional phase. Things are still being set up. Regulatory companies are still getting like licenses from NERC and so on. But the idea is that over time we should begin to see these improvements. But for now, we're still in the pre-transition phase. So
I'm looking at a situation, but maybe on a lighter note, where it looks like NERC will now not supervise all of the states, and the states will take decisions on their own with regards to their power supply and all of that. But in all of this, what Nigerians want to see is power, and they really want to, they just want to, improve power supply, more megawatts, and all of that. But looking forward, I'm looking at a state, where are we getting to that? Even if it's 10,000 megawatts, let's talk a bit about renewables before we wrap up this conversation. Do you also see Rural Electrification Agency? I think they are supposed to be doing a lot around that space. I think they're getting some funding now. What do you make of that? Are we doing well pretty around that space? What can we do better?
Yes, so we're doing well in the sense that there's funding from DFIs like the World Bank. And there are mini grids being set up in rural communities. So people that never had power supply in the past are getting power supply. But then it still comes back to this issue of affordability. When they can't pay for it, then the REA and these communities keep depending on funding, DFI funding. And the funding can't continue forever. At some point, they have to be able to pay their bills. So now the issue that companies in the power sector are trying to tackle is the issue of productive use of electricity, where rural communities who don't have electricity get this electricity. They use it to improve their businesses, improve their lives. People who were farming can now maybe start doing mechanized farming, improve their output, they make more money, they pay for electricity, and then the companies make money, expand to other communities. So that's how it's supposed to run. But then, so that's the thing that needs to be solved, the issue of productive use. How do we get rural communities to use electricity for their businesses and to improve their lives so they make more money and the sector continues to grow? I think that's now the next hurdle that REA needs to face.
But let's look ahead now and see what we should expect with regards to all of these issues. We've talked about metering, deregulating, trying to make sure the meters are affordable and people can get. What more should we be looking at moving forward? This issue of vandalism, the issue of what can just be done so that we put hands together. I think everyone has a role to play when it comes to this point now, so that we can have, and also conservation. Those days where we used to leave our ACs on, leave our lights on, I think we can do that. I can't do that anymore because you have to pay. So I think is now something that everyone needs to look at. How does that come to you?
Yes, so it's definitely an issue that everyone needs to face. And with more cost-reflective tariffs, people become more conscious of the fact that I'm paying the true cost of electricity right now. It's expensive, and I need to conserve my electricity use. But we can't do that. People can't do that if we don't have meters to monitor their electricity usage. So metering is still important, but I think that this year we'll see an improvement in Nigeria's metering gap. Another thing to look forward to this year is state electricity markets, but also in terms of the broader power sector, moving towards bilateral power trading, where distribution companies are buying power directly from generation companies, to remove the bottlenecks there with subsidies not being paid to generation companies, and just discos buying electricity for the price that they're supposed to buy it from the generation companies. Also, TCN is going to be, we will begin to see TCN being split into the market operator and independent system operator to improve efficiency as well, so that there's focus on the two different arms. Still under government, but still, like we said, privatization is not a silver bullet. It doesn't mean that things will be fixed. So just making sure that these steps are taken to improve efficiency in the power sector, I think they'll go a long way, and we're hopeful that we'll see those begin to take shape this year.
What about the discos? Let's wrap up with the discos. The discos also have a lot to do here. What about the discos?
So the discos definitely need to improve in terms of their efficiency levels.
Because they're getting more money now. And everyone expects a lot from them.
Yes, there's definitely a lot of expectation from them. But like we've said before, not all the bands of electricity are cost reflective, number one.
That's true.
But also, it's true that there needs to be a lot more efficiency in the distribution segment. We've seen a lot of discos change ownership last year because of inefficiencies in their past owners, and I think we'll see more of those this year. as the heat ramps up under them, with people complaining, if I'm supposed to get 20 hours, I'm paying 300 naira and I'm getting less than that. There's definitely a lot of heat on them. And I think that this year we'll see a lot of improvements in efficiency as power continues to change hands across ownership in the discos. Indeed.
Interesting conversation as usual. Noelle Okwedy is a consultant at Nextier Power. I think we'll be talking more power this year with you. Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate this. It's good to really see you this new year. We've been talking around Nigeria's electricity sector. Of course, a lot of development around that space. I think it's